Today's discussion will be presented in three sections since we're recording this session for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Feel free to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to get them answered online. We are particularly pleased to welcome our moderator, Tom Temin, host of the Federal Drive on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Let me turn over the reins to Tom to begin today's discussion.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. For more than 15 years, the federal government has been on a Go Green drive. And as the single largest enterprise in the United States, the government is simply energy intensive. Among the most potent initiatives driven by successive presidential orders are reducing building electricity consumption and making fleets more fuel efficient. And the military is leading the way on many of these things, but it's really across the government. Our guests today are Roberto Guerrero. He's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy at the Air Force. Dan Ammon, the Senior Advisor for Energy Planning and Review for the Environmental Protection Agency. Major General Al Aycock, the Director of Operations for the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management at the Army. Rear Admiral Kevin Slates, he's Director of the Energy and Environmental Readiness Division in the Office of Chief of Naval Operations. And Mike Madsden, President of the Defense and Space Strategic Business Unit of Honeywell Aerospace. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us this morning. And I want to start with kind of a situation report of where the military branches and the civilian federal government are at this point. You're all under directives and presidential orders and laws. They layer on one another to reduce the energy footprint of the federal government. Why don't we start with the Air Force? Roberto?
Okay, well, first off, thank you for giving us a chance to talk about the energy program here in the Air Force. And, for us, what we've seen is in 2013, we updated our strategic plan. That strategic plan had four major priorities, and they were to improve resiliency, to reduce demand, to ensure supply, and to foster an energy-aware culture. So some examples of what we're doing in each one of those areas would be for improving resiliency at our major depot bases, which are pretty intensive energy users. We've worked with them to partner with local communities, local utilities to provide, for example, at Robins and Tinker Air Force Base, natural gas production on the base, which also has a added effort to produce electricity for us too, and to prioritize that electricity in case of man-made or natural disaster to allow us to continue the mission for that particular base. From a reduced demand perspective, you'll see in the KC-135, we recently started an initiative to upgrade the engines to the KC-135 tanker aircraft. The upgrades of those engines are basically a component update within the engine itself that's going to result in about a 1.5% fuel efficiency increase for those particular engines. Now, when you look at the Air Force, we're the biggest consumers of energy in the federal government with about a $9 billion bill. 86% of that is aviation. So we're really looking at how we affect the culture. So our last piece is when we look at fostering an energy-aware culture, it's about analyzing the operations, looking at ways we can be more efficient. We see times that technological advances that we incorporate in one area have multiple second and third order effects. So those are some big picture items of what the Air Force is doing to reduce.
And 1.5% is not a big percentage, but it's a lot of gallons, isn't it?
Sure. When you look at the overall picture of the aviation piece for us, which is over $7 billion worth of fuel, 1.5%, is over $100 million. So it's a big piece.
All right. Al, the Army has had a lot of activity here.
I also appreciate the opportunity to be here and to discuss this. In the Army, it really is about readiness. Every dollar that we spend on energy is a dollar that we're not spending on readiness, and so we really want to focus on that area. So after we get to our mission areas, we are looking at lowering the demand for energy. We're looking at the lowest cost that we can pay for the energy, which is a part of our emphasis on the renewable area. And we also want a reliable source of energy. So we want energy security at our base. And so we're looking at various ways to make that happen. We really focus on what we need for soldiers. We've had a huge effort to lower the demand in theater for energy because every truck that travels up to a base camp is one more danger area that we have. And so we've really worked hard with our soldiers on that. We've also looked at how we look at our vehicles themselves. So our vehicles have become much more energy efficient, especially our non-tactical vehicles that run many of our installations. The last thing is our basing power. After we pay for our people, the largest cost we have at our bases is energy cost. And we want to reduce that to the point where we can get the programs on the basis to make things work right. We're looking at larger projects. We have an Energy Initiatives Task Force right now that is looking at the 10 megawatt and above projects at our installations. We've been very successful. We have 13 projects around the continental United States. We've cut the ribbon on the one at Fort Huachuca, and these are all focused on renewables in that area. We have a net zero pilot that we're getting ready to take across our entire installation group. So we have 17 installations teaching all the other installations the lessons that we've learned about how to be a net zero area. And then the last part is really focused on how we can reduce the demand, how we can use third-party financing, for example, to leverage what we can do from a year-to-year budget to have a longer-term area. So in energy savings performance contracts, we lead the federal government in that particular area, and without our industry partners, we would not be where we are in that particular region. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go back to that too later on. The energy savings performance contracts, I think, are a key part of what a lot of agencies are doing or thinking about doing. And in the Navy, Kevin.
Like Al said, our energy program is really focused on readiness. If you look at the program, it's tied to kind of two components, operational and then the shore side. And they're a little bit different, but on both of them, the focus is how do we reduce consumption, and then also alternatives, whether it's alternative energy or alternative fuel sources. On the shore side, I think we're doing very well. We've reduced consumption about 27%, still working on that and still have opportunities. Have a very aggressive renewable, program, very similar to the Army. We have a renewable energy program office that's all they focus on is, large-scale renewable energy projects. And, whether those projects are on our base or, off our base and we're the off-taker of that power, either way, obviously, we're, pushing to try to increase the amount of renewables we use. On the operational side for us, kind of like the Air Force, we do consume a lot of fuel with the ships and the planes that we have. And, maybe a little different scenario is, we kind of operate everywhere in the middle of the ocean, and we got to have that fuel at that, that point of operation for us. So there's a big vulnerability for us in, moving fuel to where we need it to go. So from the fleet perspective, the operational fleet, we've really been focused on how do we reduce consumption, not to be green, but because it is capability. If we can reduce the, consumption on a ship, say 10%, that basically means we can unplug from an oiler for maybe another 3 or 4 days at a time, which is pretty significant, obviously, for us from an operational capability standpoint. So we've got a lot of technical initiatives going on, improvements for the fleet that will gain some of those efficiencies. But I think, like the other services, we recognize that technology isn't going to do it by itself. So we spent a lot of time and effort on how to impact our culture and our behavior, and see that there's some great benefit to just be able to maybe do some things differently in the Navy that, offer big savings. So we just rolled out this week this Energy Warrior campaign, which is, targeted to get at our junior sailors, which is the majority of the Navy, targeting folks under 26 and really trying to educate them as well as extract their ideas. And, kind of a new approach for us. We rolled out a digital, publication or /app that, seems to be gaining a lot of traction. But I think the other thing is, frankly, all of us services work together pretty well, talk and share ideas and, have many of the same common goals.
It is difficult to get those under 26 just to turn the lights off sometimes. It doesn't matter, maybe even 27. And Dan, so what we've heard is there's a combination of things. There are the specific initiatives, but then there's also program and office structures to support that and changes in acquisition to further support it. So it operates on a lot of levels. What do you see in the EPA? And what do you see across government? Because the EPA has to reduce its own energy as an entity, but it also has that view of the whole carbon footprint idea government-wide.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for having us here also, Tom, for the opportunity to discuss this. And before I get started, I wanted to wish Secretary Guerrero, I believe it's your guys' birthday today, isn't it, for the Air Force?
67 years.
Yeah, so happy birthday. So, pulling back a little bit and looking at the whole government as far as the energy perspective goes, if you look at it from that side, DOD is basically 85% plus or minus of the overall federal government's energy perspective. And so then if you look at the civilian agencies after that and you take out VA, GSA, and DOE, then there's the rest of us. So those are the big ones, the big four: DOD with the services, and then VA, GSA, and then DOE. Then there's everybody else.
GSA by virtue of the fleet.
The fleet and their building inventory also.
Right, sure. Mm-hmm.
So they're the big players. So really the way DOD goes is the way the federal government goes primarily. So if they're doing well, the government's doing well. And right now, the last couple of years on energy, the government has been fairly flat. In fiscal year 2012 and fiscal year 2013, it's been about 20% reduction since 2005. And the goal is obviously in 2015, as we all know, is a 30%. So the government's flattened out a little bit. There's a bunch of different reasons for that. But I know there's a big push on right now through ESPCs and other initiatives to kind of kickstart that. So where we are, EPA, is we've been lucky because, again, we're a smaller agency and we can really get our arms around our inventory. You know, my whole inventory at EPA is about 130 locations, which is probably one of these guys' bases. Right? So, I mean, our whole inventory, reporting inventory, is pretty small. And I've been to pretty much all of them, and I know the facility managers personally in most cases. So it's a little different perspective for most of the civilian agencies, especially the smaller ones. But we've done very well. We're on track to meet our goals. But that's because, again, we have an inventory that we're able to do that on. But there's a lot of challenges ahead for the federal government, and especially in energy reductions and in energy efficiency. And there's new targets that'll be coming out shortly that they're going to kind of up the ante or continue the ante. But there's a lot of attention that's paid around this, both from OMB, Congress, and the White House, primarily tied to it's one of the few areas within the federal government that actually pays for itself. You reduce energy, you get money out of that. So it's a big emphasis. People like to see those reductions, and they like to play in this arena.
All right. And so, Mike, give us the Honeywell perspective looking across government. Sounds as if the 20% level of reduction, maybe the easy stuff has been done. The next 10% might be a lot harder.
Well, yeah, thanks again, Tom. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thanks also for letting us join today. You know, Honeywell's not a large Department of Defense contractor, but from an energy perspective, we are a large contractor for the DoD because we participate in so many different areas. We really support the DoD and the rest of the government agencies in about 5 spaces relative to energy efficiency, security, and availability. ESPCs, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about, but these ideas of bringing equipment to facilities in particular where we can save energy and pay ourselves back out of those energy savings. It's really a great concept because the DoD can't lose in that. They're going to gain the energy savings, and the investment is really borne by the industry partners. Microgrids, which are another part of that. We have some great microgrid installations at Wheeler and at Fort Bragg and at the GSA White Oak facility. Allowing facilities to use the energy that's at their disposal more efficiently, balance the power loads across the different buildings and the different types of generation they have, and the ability to go on island mode, if you will, to be able to operate independent of the grid for an extended period of time, which we've seen with the Hurricane Sandy was a critical capability from a security standpoint. Turbochargers, we have about 100,000 turbochargers installed on different vehicles today with the DoD. Of course, we know the benefits those bring in terms of energy efficiency. And gas turbine engines and avionics is another area that we're participating in heavily with the DoD, particularly with the Air Force. The energy consumption with aviation is often viewed as something that's unavoidable, but it's actually quite addressable. And I think a lot of folks would recognize the benefit that comes from a more efficient gas turbine engine, but a lot of folks probably wouldn't recognize something like a weather radar as an energy savings enhancement. The ability to take 5 or 10 minutes off a 1 or 2 hour flight is a 10% savings. And you think about the investment that it takes to get 5 or 10% savings in fuel through technologies in the engine area or the aircraft area, it's a big deal. And then the last area is biofuels. This idea of energy independence, the ability to bring renewable sources to the biofuel equation, to be able to bring non-food crops into the biofuel area and not compete with the food chain, but at the same time create that energy independence with a drop-in complete replacement fuel. And one of the neat things about what we're doing is because we make the engines and we make the biofuels, we're able to test what we make and demonstrate that it's compatible. So we're really seeing the energy in this space, if you will, pardon my pun, increase the focus on this as the DoD faces the budget downturn. This is money that can be used for other purposes.
All right, we're going to get into those in more depth as we go forward. Right now, we're going to take a short break. Our guests today are Roberto Guerrero. He's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy at the Air Force. Dan Ammon, Senior Advisor for Energy, Planning, and Review at the EPA. Major General Al Aycock, Director of Operations for the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management at the Army. Rear Admiral Kevin Slates, Director of the Energy and Environmental Readiness Division in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations. And Mike Madsen. He is President of the Defense and Space Strategic Business Unit of Honeywell Aerospace. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This is American Readiness, Renewable Power and Efficiency Technologies, sponsored by Honeywell on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.